Hello everybody, welcome back to part 2 of the unit tier list when it comes to anti-air units. I don't think there's any housekeeping that needs to be done, so let's just jump right back into it. Last time we did the ETO 96, which is basically just a book M1 copy. ETO 86, very similar, if not copy of the Faster 4. Let me see, the difference here is the ETO is faster, has more autonomy, gets Space Igla, and by the looks of it, as a drawback, has a salvo size of only 2. Let me actually, I have the armory tool open. I opened it preemptively just in case. ETO 86 does have a salvo length of 2 and a shot reload of 2 as well, meaning it fires 2 seconds with 2 missiles with 2 seconds in between, and then has to reload for 10 seconds. There's also an ETO 86M. Oh, that's the man pad, okay. The Faster 4 fires 4 missiles with 2 seconds in between and 10-second reload time after that. So, but honestly, this is definitely preferable. You gain 15% extra accuracy, and you lose 2 missiles in total, so you only get 10 in total. But I think a salvo length of 2 with 55% accuracy is a lot better than a salvo size of 4 with 40% accuracy, and you even cost less, and you're a bit faster as well. The speed is actually, it's not a deal breaker, but 30 km/h extra off-road is definitely nice to have. So a significant upgrade, honestly, if you ask me. And honestly, B tier. And of course, one of the reasons we don't see it is because you have so many better options. But like this, for example, ETO 90. I don't think we need to really talk about this a whole lot, why this is good. Like the second highest range versus helicopters that you basically can get. The only unit that has more is the Hawk PIP III. To my knowledge, at least. Chaparral 3, Krotal, Tunguska M, they all have this amazing range versus helicopters. The possibly only non-radar piece that isn't a non-radar version of an existing piece, like Hawk and Neva M1T. Those are anti-plane units that have the special trait of not being radar. But when it comes to like non-radar units that are typically anti-helicopter units, like the Krotal, like the Praga, like this, like Strelas, this has 2800 meter range, which is unique. Normal Krotals have 2625. No other, helicopter-focused AAPs, let's put it that way, has as much and while also not being radar, of course, has that much anti-plane range. In fact, it even outranges all the specs that have radar outside of the automatic. That is a bigger deal than it might sound like. So I think it's S tier. It certainly is S tier. I don't think it is as broken or like overpowered as other units in the S tier, but it still very much is S tier. Oh, how I love this unit. It is just so incredibly versatile. It can act as fire support, base defense, and the thing with this unit is, yes, it only has 15% accuracy, but it has 5 front armor, it has 2800 meter range. For that price, that is incredibly good. It just eats rocket pod helos like nothing else. Like, sure, you might not instantly kill them or anything, but they won't kill you either. And you just, with the first salvo, there's a very high chance that you're gonna crit them, like panic them and stun them immediately. And if you have 2 of them, you essentially can deal with virtually any helo that isn't like a longbow or a tiger, or something that outranges it like a Nimrod. These things are just so incredibly versatile. I think they're incredibly underrated. I might overrate them a tad, like a bit, not much, but a bit. I will admit this. I will admit that this might be a possibility. But I think overall, I think they're vastly underrated. I think one other issue is that they are generally indexed, and I'm gonna put them in 8 here, whether you like it or not. One issue might be that they are this, as well as the only other ones are obviously the Chinese and the North Korean one, with the Chinese being the only one with 6 front armor, if I'm correct. Let me just quickly check. Chinese one has 6, and I think maybe North Korean has 6 as well. So for some reason, The Finnish one has only 5. Still, this is just such an incredibly good unit. And once again, what I was going to say is, I think one of the reasons why people might underrate them is that they are in decks that you just don't see them very often due to the decks they are in. In Finpol, you just don't need it because you have Ito 90s and you have Erikois. That's basically your anti-helo dealt with, right? And for anti-plane, of course, you don't buying them. So that's one reason why people might just not put them in. Plus, of course, it's a bit hard maybe to fit them in as well, because Ito 90 and Erikois, they're just so good. And then you don't really necessarily need as much more anti-helo, although I still like to use them. And of course, in Red Dragons, nobody plays Red Dragons, and Red Dragons is bad. But if this were in Scandinavia, I think the decks that would benefit the most out of this are probably on Blue Force side. Commonwealth would love it. USA would love it. Any German coalition would love it. Scandinavia would love it. Blue Dragons would probably also love it. Although, yeah, honestly, I think nearly every Blue 4 coalition or strong deck, or like any Blue 4 deck, would absolutely love this. Eastern Bloc would use it as well, but again, not really needed because you have the LSTR, USSR, you have the Scratchets. On-Town would probably also really like it. I think this is a better unit than the BOV 3, although then you would lose the wheel thing when it comes to BOV 3. But like, I think this unit is just in so many decks where it's not even in Red Dragons, even though I like to use them, it's not really that much needed, since very often you use the Hwasong Chong, and you have the HQ7 as well, and other non-radar AA options, by which I mean the Hwasong Chong, actually. That's it. But if you run the Hwasong Chong, then there's no real need. Of course, they're still nice, but you're kind of double dipping into the same role. But yeah, literally any Blue 4 deck would probably love this. I can't think of one that wouldn't. Right? I could see maybe it not being run in USA, since you usually have CS and PIVADS and probably would not skip on them. So I guess that's one deck. Commonwealth loves it. Base defense, cheap AA, that kind of stuff. They would absolutely coom. Any German coalition, because any of the German coalitions, all of them, they don't have the best like cheap flank and AA defense. Eurocore kind of has it with the VDAA and the Earl Noir, but being non-radar and having that much range is just, yeah. Enough of that. ITPSV Marksman is the best marksman in the game, ironically. It is fast enough. Let me just scroll up to the other 50-point marksman. Oh, I've only red 4 selected, that's why. The other 50-point marksman is the Centurion, I believe. Yeah. I now have to scroll down again. I already have the feeling this is gonna me taking this long makes this not a 2-part video. So you get 10% more accuracy and stabilizer. I don't know if there's any merit to it or not. You get 1 more front armor. Oh, this is 60 point, not 50. Anyway, you get a lot more accuracy, a lot more stabilizer. And you also, I guess, here's the 60.1. Sure, you lose 4 front armor, not a big deal. You gain 5 kmh, is a big deal. You're still not particularly fast. But the other thing is also 10% more accuracy and stabilizer, right? This thing has the same rate of fire as a Gepard. So this is essentially, whoopsie, Gepard M1 with a better stabilizer. And for 5 points more, you gain more front armor, meaning you will definitely easily survive rocket pods. You will survive 20 AP seed missiles, which I believe is the harm used by the Raven. Yes, so probably the most seen seed plane these days, or like the most impactful seed plane, I'd argue, because it has the best stealth by a big margin, would need 2 shots, which is massive. So yeah, and of course, 10% extra accuracy, that's massive. That's 20% DP effectively, if you ignore veterancy, effectively 20% DPS boost compared to the other marksmen. And then stabilizer, of course, also 10%. That is just, and 50 kmh, it's still pretty slow, don't get me wrong, but to make up for it, your ammo problems are also not as much of an issue because you hit more and that does have to shoot less. The speed is still an issue, so I don't need to put it in A tier. I think it's still not as good as, let's say, the Gepard A1, just because I think the speed is so important for a spec, but it is significantly better than the other Marksman. Your basic 60-point Hawk, I think they are a tad underrated, because you still have to keep in mind it's cheap 9 HE, right? The off-road speed is very annoying, but not as big of an issue because it's not a frontline unit. But I think 60.9 HE with a good range and good, like, acceptable accuracy, like let's compare to the book, right? Book also has 60% if 50% if I'm not wrong. Yeah, but like you are basically for all intents and purposes, you're the same unit for 10 points less. You lose off-road speed, you lose one missile, but since you have to resupply them anyway, that's not a big deal. So I think they're certainly usable. If you have, no other AAPs in the game, anti-plane AAPs in the game, it's gonna be, as long as you have good like anti-helo AA, your AA is gonna be okay, or decent ASFs. In a pinch, it's a decent anti-plane unit. The closed arrow, basically the Avenger on steroids. It's essentially a Stinger C, but 1 step extra range for 10 points more. Certainly worth it, but it still has very little range on a chassis that is, while fast, just has no armor. So with all the rocket pod healers, etc. around, you're gonna die very, very easily if you're getting spotted. It's not so, and this funnily enough makes it more of an anti-plane unit. You have it in the forest, the plane flies over it, and you get 2 missiles off with 70% base accuracy, and suddenly you're just gonna double tapping a plane. Similar to Wolverine, just more consistent and of course more expensive. So yeah, it's one of those units that doesn't really have. I guess Sam is capitalized. I don't know if Kin is. It doesn't really have a main role as like helo killer, plane killer. It's once again one of those supporting types of AA units that would be nice to fit in, but oftentimes it's hard. The non-radar PIVADS or the Vulcan, it's an okay like base defense, right? It has decent range. It's non-radar, acceptable accuracy given that it has no radar again, and given the. Let me actually check something. And given the price, unfortunately not 2625, which is reserved for the radar version. But it can be decent base defense. It's not very fast. Off-road, which again not a big deal since you usually use it for flank defense and not offensively. I think that's all there is to say. Same rate of fire, of course, as the other pivots. Which is the same as the Gepard, but of course significantly less accuracy. Let me just think here. I don't think it's quite B tier. It's essentially like a TCM, right? What does a TCM have? Yeah, TCM has the same range, same rate of fire, but of course not wheeled. I think it's C tier. In a pinch, once again, can be alright base defense, and some decks will certainly be happy to have it, but yeah. Pivots. I don't think we had the pivots yet, did we? It's certainly A tier. Again, that 0.2 second aim time versus any unit is just incredibly strong. Okay, like good accuracy. It's not amazing, but good accuracy. It doesn't have a stabilizer, but that's offset by the accuracy. So when you attack move it, you at least aim virtually instantly. 2 front and 2 side as opposed to the pivots, which is nice. Yeah. Beho, don't be again one of those things. Don't be fooled by this rate of fire. That really gives you the wrong picture when it comes to anti-air and specs. This is once again same rate of fire as a Gepard. Same accuracy. No, Gepard A1 has 60% accuracy, so a bit less accuracy, significantly less stabilizer. I believe it is a bit slower than a Gepard. You won't be able to see this because it's blocked by the tier list, but I'm just gonna tell you. So the Gepard for the same points has same speed actually, more autonomy, 3 front armor versus 2, 1 more back armor, but 5% more accuracy, 15% extra stabilizer. But I think one of the big issues is actually the autonomy. Only 450 for a spec that is... It's not gonna be a big issue all the time, but it can certainly sometimes be an issue. And it has significantly less ammo, only 69 shots, nice, versus 92 on the Gepard. Comparatively, the Marksman has 68, not nice. So yeah, but it is, you know, mobile. It has the good accuracy, certainly B tier. Kub-M, I believe we went over this before last game. Yeah, Flacom Kub-M. It's a fun little unit, but don't expect it to change your world. Kub-M4, essentially a book M1. Big deal, of course, is it is cheaper and it has a much higher availability. 6.4 base, or is it even 7.4? I think it's 6.4. But yeah, you get 4 upweighted as opposed to 3, or maybe even 5. And it's cheaper, has the same missiles. You only get 3, and you're also slower. But you know, not everyone counter batteries your AA. This thing, you might think, well, it's only 10 points, but it's actually a wasted slot. It has horrible accuracy. I believe it has horrible rate of fire. It has a rate of fire of, okay, I guess it shoots every 1.6 seconds. That's 1/4 of the rate of fire, unless my math is horrible, of a Gepard or something like that. It's just... And of course, you know, it has horrible range. It has 1.5 HE, but it only has, how many shots does it have? 44 shots. You might again think, well, this is only 10 points, but it's not just about that, it's also about the wasted card in your deck, right? It's a support unit, which are for most decks very valuable, especially in Scandi. Although, admittedly, we shouldn't take this into account in which decks it comes in when it comes to the tier list. We should look over that, but it's worth mentioning anyway. But support slots are pretty valuable and also relatively expensive. I think more expensive than infantry slots. And its sole role, base defense, you know, it is literally the only role it can actually fill because of its horrible autonomy as well. It also does pretty horrible because it just doesn't stun, doesn't hit, doesn't do damage. It is one of the very few E tier units here. VEAK 40. It's an interesting piece, I believe. Let me just look at the stats. It has ammo issues. Actually, no, it doesn't. It has 180 shots, which is a ton. Holy moly. Maybe they fixed that, because I remember in the past using it before this kind of DLC and running out of ammo frequently. It doesn't shoot very fast, shot reload of 0.8 seconds. Of course, only has 40% accuracy, no stabilizer, decent autonomy and speed. But yeah, that low rate of fire is kind of offset by the 1.5 HE power, but at the same time it's only 40 points, right? 40 points for a radar AA piece with that much range, not that horrible. But I think that low shot means that there's a high variance in terms of... It's not very consistent, right? Because the thing with specs is, when you want to get helicopters, especially, you know, attacking with it, you need it to stun quickly. And with a low shot reload, essentially a low rate of fire, not hitting means that there's obviously a higher time until you have the next, longer time until you have the next chance to shoot again. And you know, on average, of course, against planes, that's not as big of a deal because of the extra HE to kind of make up for it. Against helicopters, not so much. LVKV 40, easy A tier. A while ago, I wouldn't have said that, but here is the thing. It is quite literally a support unit. It is not like a Gepard that is just, you know, a consistent helicopter killer and does also well against planes. It is decent against helicopters. It's acceptable, you know. It's not so great versus planes, but it still does some damage. But not nearly as much as a Gepard would, for example, in the same time frame. However, the big deal is, for one, it has 5 front armor. It has AP rounds and 1900 meter range against grounds, and 1.5 HE as well. It's it just, you know, it kills planes, or like deals damage to planes, kills helicopters, kills IFVs, kills infantry, kills any kind of transport. It has something to deal with. It is a supporting tool against anything that isn't a tank, really. It helps you to deal with infantry, again, planes. It is just like, you know, the Wolverine is a support, and the Kinsam Closed Arrow is a support unit against planes and such, or a support AA unit, you know, helps killing planes but doesn't actually fill its own role. The LVKV is in a similar thing, just against literally anything that isn't a tank. And even against tank, like light tanks, if we ignore like T-34s and such, of course. And that is pretty unique. The Automatic is, of course, the only other unit that would kind of do the same thing, but the Automatic is also just, you know, kind of different in a way. It is just really amazing. And you don't, when you buy this unit, you shouldn't buy 2 of those and be like, all right, I have my AA. And in the opener it can be fine, because in the opener you generally don't really expect that many planes, or if you're worried you can always just buy an ASF. But in the long run it's not gonna just, you know, be your main AA. So that's something you have to keep in mind. But it is just so strong against anything, really. And in that sense, you know, helps you save points in the opener as well, because your other, you know, if you buy a Gepard or something, again, prime example, it kills helos, it kills planes, or like deters planes and helos at the very least. But when it's not shooting, it generally doesn't really do much. Sometimes, you know, it can kill infantry or will kill infantry, but it's mostly in self-defense or when you're desperate. LVKV, in between of, you know, dealing with helicopters and planes, it will also do more work for you for basically the same price. And it will still deter helos, and to a certain extent planes, like the Gepard would. And even if it doesn't kill them, it stuns them fairly efficiently. And that is really valuable, and I think sorely underrated. And one of the issues is just that it's hard to fit in very often, because you want the beacon, you want a mortar, you want the automatic, you probably want the missile APs, and maybe you also want the RBS-70, and that's already 5 slots, right? So tough to fit in, but severely underrated in my opinion. No, the big thing, it wouldn't be so bad if it didn't have to reload after every single missile. It has decent range, acceptable accuracy, it's cheap, but it's slow as fuck, has no autonomy, and has to reload after every single missile. I don't think there's more to say, right? For 10 points, the Wolverine does basically a similar thing, but just better in every way. 40-point Hawks, they're similar like the Flacom Kub-M. They actually have, hold up, let me actually compare them. For 5 points less, oh no, they're literally the same. They're literally the same, but for 5 points less. So they're essentially better. They're a bit faster, slower, but they have also more autonomy, which is actually something worth noting. But yeah, they're basically the same unit. Just this one is actually a tad better. It's not worthy in B tier, I think. But yeah. This Hawk we already talked about. Same 60-point Hawk. EOTS I-Hawk. I would not necessarily recommend this in 1 versus 1 decks unless you are really bad at radar micro. Then, you know, of course. And you either don't have the time, or you're too lazy, or you don't just simply don't want to get better at it or learn it, or, you know, you're like, whatever, I'll just use this, and it's fine, you know. In team games, it's a great unit anyway, because in team games, even if your radar area micro is good, the thing is with Seed, even if it doesn't kill your AAPs, if it forces you to be, you know, AAPs to be turned off, it still did a job most of the time, you know, preventing your plane to stun or kill the other plane, the Kernos or something along those lines, before drop the bombs, or after even, you know, make it allow the plane to come out alive. So just because, you know, you don't get killed by Seed doesn't necessarily mean Seed doesn't do anything. This is why, even again, if your Seed micro is perfect, an EOTS I-Hawk or a Neva M1T, especially in team games, certainly still has a value. In 1 versus 1s, it's a bit tougher, because first of all, Seed is significantly rarer, depending on the deck, of course. In US, it's very frequent that you see Seed nowadays. But plus, you know, it is, even if the enemy has it, it's harder to spend points on it most of the time, because there's a lot of points, and you know, it doesn't always do immediately anything. But if you know 3 of your teammates have bombers already or something, and then you buy a seaplane, that's comparatively a lot less points. But also it's just, you know, compared to the I-Hawk, you know, for 15 points you don't get any additional killing power, and the radar non-radar trade doesn't really help. Now if you only had a choice between these two, that'd be fine, but the other thing is the decks that this is available in, you generally have much stronger radar AA options. So this is the type of unit that in 1 vs 1s I generally would not necessarily recommend it, but in team games it can be pretty good. Avenger, like the Kinsam, I would still put it in C tier. I would, you know, the low ranges just make it even less possible, like even harder to use it offensively. ADATS. That's a very interesting unit. Main issue of the ADATS is the 8 rounds coupled with the anti-ground range. The thing is, of course, the fact that it can shoot it. Okay, so let's split this up into two parts. The anti-air capabilities are obviously amazing. It's essentially a Crotal with 10% more accuracy, 1 extra HE, meaning with a critical hit it will one-shot planes that don't have 2 armor or 15 HP, and that's of course amazing given that it doesn't have a radar. The anti-ground capabilities are also amazing: 2800 meter range, 25 AP, 70% accuracy. Holy moly! 2 front armor means you don't get instantly popped by something like an AMX-10. The thing is just, you can't turn off like only the anti-plane or anti-air capabilities or the anti-ground capabilities. So it is very easy, you know, that unless you wanted to use it as a pure anti-plane piece, in which case you would just keep it like out of line of sight of ground units, which is not always possible but generally is, then it can very easily happen that either because you don't want it to waste missiles on ground units, it will just be turned off when it should shoot at planes or helicopters, and given its relatively low range against planes, by the time you notice it and turn it on, the plane might be out of range again. And if you don't do that, then it's very, very easy that it wastes missiles against 5-pointers or ground units, even if it's a tank or something or anything else that just drives by in range. You might shoot and then immediately lose line of sight because there's a building or something suddenly. So it is a very, very awkward A piece, and for 110 points, and you know, generally not the capability to stun, let alone kill a plane, unless you get very, very lucky before it shoots at you, means that ATGM planes or something can very, very easily hunt it down as well, since generally speaking it is fairly close to the front line. And that makes it just, in theory, a really strong unit if you micro it well, but in practice, incredibly awkward. Like, even in my eyes, I don't use it very often, but even if you were to play perfectly, it's still like incredibly. It's so much effort to just make this unit worth. I think in team games it can be fine if you just buy it for pure, you know, anti-air capabilities. 1 vs 1, not so much, and honestly, it's only B tier. If the anti-ground and anti-air units, or you know, weapon systems, if you want to call it, were split into 2 weapons and/or it had twice the missile, no, it would carry twice the missiles, it would be significantly better. But the way it is now, it is just way too awkward, it's just awkward, it's all. And tough to use, and just a, you know, ATGM plane, etc. magnet. Vulcan, we went over this. Come on, let me write in there. There we go. We had this earlier with the South Koreans. We had the PIVADS as well. It was an A tier too. It has, of course, 1 less front and side armor, but it's still amazing. This M42 AAG. I used this in a deck game recently, and someone even made a comment saying, "Oh, it's not that bad." And honestly, I still pretty much disagree. It is pretty bad. It has a horrible rate of fire. It has acceptable range, but it just has horrible rate of fire. 1.6 seconds between shots. I just refuse to believe that this is a good unit based on everything I've seen and experienced. So I will put this in D tier. And you are free to tell me why I'm wrong in the comments. Guntank, again, same rate of fire as a Gepard. So don't be fooled by the rate of fire it shows here. It does have 92 shots, just like the Gepard. So the gun is literally a stat copy of the Gepard A1 actually. Now that look at it right. Hold up. Flak Panzer, Gepard A1. It actually has 5% more stabilizer and 5% less accuracy. I always think the Gepard A1 has 55% accuracy, but it has 60. It is a tad worse, I'd say. I don't think it's certainly that stabilizer is worth as much as accuracy. So the trade-off is a bit more in favor of the Gepard. More or less roughly same armor, but I think more top armor. It is slower and has pretty bad autonomy. And that autonomy is what holds it back massively. In fact, I'm very much inclined to essentially purely based on the autonomy, rank what would otherwise probably be an A tier unit into C tier. Like 300 autonomy, 300 kilometers autonomy, forest bag, even on a small map like Patriot in a 1 vs 1, is horrible, like absolutely horrible. And it has, because being an AA piece, a strong AA piece, fairly expensive, it has to be near the front line. You can't always resupply it. And with mediocre off-road speed as well, means that you drive for longer, and of course the autonomy, in case you didn't know, is not actually a measurement in terms of how far you can go, it is how long you can drive. 1 kilometer equals to 1 second. And that of course means that the lower your off-road speed is, the longer you'll be driving for the same distance, unless you're on the road of course, and as such your autonomy is essentially even lower. So yeah, it's just, I'm sorry, it may be harsh, but it's just how it is. The 40-point Chaparral, I think it might not be really that bad given it's only 40 points with good range, lots of missiles. I think it might be a tad underrated. Like think about it, like 40 points, good range, 4 missiles at ready, they're fire and forget as well. 6 AG, they will one-shot stuff like Lynxes. I think it's mainly the chassis that makes it awkward. It's not that mobile, 400 kilometers autonomy, only 1 front and side armor. But I think it's not really that horrible. I think it might even be better than the 50, depending on, of course, what other AA units you have access to. It might be better than the A1 Chaparral, as stupid as it might sound. But I think maybe I'm thinking too much. I'm gonna put it in D tier for now. But the longer I look at it, the more I'm like, you know, it might not be that horrible. Like, let's compare it to is there a similar unit here? I mean, I guess we can compare it to like the Faster 4, right? You get more range, 2 more HE. What's the shot reload in between? Is it also 2 seconds? Is 3 seconds. Ooh, yeah. 3 seconds between individual shots is actually pretty bad. I guess it explains why the A3 Chaparral sometimes it sucks so much. Yeah, I think that really holds it down. I think if it had 2 or ideally 1 seconds between missiles, that thing would actually be pretty dope. Like if you look at Strela 10M, for example, there's 2 seconds in between missiles. So I think it's generally for the whole Chaparral line, there's 3 seconds in between missiles as opposed to 2. It actually makes it really awkward. And I think I actually didn't realize that before. I always had the hunch, or like the feeling that for some reason the Chaparral has such a long time between missiles, but I never actually bothered checking it. If you look at the Tunguska, for example, has I mean, they're guided, granted. They have 1 second between missiles, but as far as I know, the reload time immediately starts the moment the first one is out. So it virtually has like no reload time in between, you know, after, you know, you missed or hit, so you immediately fire the next one. Anyway, Praga. What's the movie called? The Devil Wears... The Devil Wears... Oh, Prada! I'm a retard. Sorry. I'm a dumbass. I don't know why I didn't... Anyway. It's enough embarrassment for one day, hopefully. He says while continuing to record this video. Praga is just pretty bad. It also has pretty horrible rate of fire. I mean, actually, it has 0.6 seconds between shots. It's not that horrible, admittedly. It fires for 11 shots and then he has to reload for 5 seconds. And I think that's probably what kills it. 11 shots may sound like a lot, but if you have only 15% accuracy, that's not a lot. It's only 20 points, admittedly. And then it has to reload for 5 seconds. Admittedly, if you look at it at the stats, you know, it may not be as bad as I think it is, given it's only 20 points. But honestly, all the experiences that I had with it and against it, it's just bad. Strop 1. Oh, we're getting to it very soon. Has the exact same reload as the exact same gun, but 10% extra accuracy. You lose the wheels. It's probably even worse. I don't think it's quite E tier, but it's certainly worse. Strop 2. I feel like I'm one of the few people who actually hate this unit. I mean, I don't hate it, you know. I always play it up a bit because so many people love this unit that I just... That fact makes me dislike it even more. It sounds childish and is childish, but it's basically how it is. Well, it's just a video game, so who cares? How does Strop 2? People love it because, hey, it's wheeled, you know, it has a lot of range versus helicopters, it has a good rate of fire, which is true, although it has reload after 22 shots. Shot reload of 0.3 seconds, so within that salvo it has a higher rate of fire than the Gepard, but of course it has only 35% accuracy, and of course it has no stabilizer, and of course it has pretty bad range against planes. So that the issue that very often occurs is that you attack move it, you get in range, you aim, and the helicopter kills you just after you finish the aim that got your first shots out. If you're at max range, of course, and they might MTV and the like, you know, they will not be able to kill you. But if you're attack moving and, you know, let's say there's a forest in front of you and there's a helicopter behind it and you have no line of sight. You move laterally, you move to the side, attack move to the side. You get line of sight. Your turret turns, you aim, helicopter turns like 10 degrees, and with its OP 0.2 seconds aim time, shoots at rocket pods and kills you. Now, of course, you know, this, on the one hand, you know, you would say, hey, that's operator error, and that's true. You should not do that. On the other hand, you know, that happens fairly frequently, and, or like these situations happen fairly frequently, and this is a 60-point helicopter killer, and even then it's not a killer because, you know, if you engage an Mi-24 VP, a longbow at an Apache, Mi-28, a cooler at max range, they will fire the missiles, fly backwards, and because you take so long to aim and you have so poor accuracy, you probably will not stun it and they kill you before. Admittedly, I may be nitpicking here, but these are just the situations that wouldn't generally happen with other pieces that are just better. It doesn't happen with stuff like Gepards. Then again, Gepard is wheeled. It's not wheeled, and it has radar. So seed comes and it dies, and it's slower, of course. But you know, the Bov 3 does very often a similar job for half the price, because very often you don't really need the range or can't even make good use of it, and you only get 4 Iglas. Now, I'm not gonna put it in E tier. I'm not gonna put it in S tier. I'm putting it in B tier. You know, again, this whole disruptive garbage is a bit overplayed, but I think it is vastly overrated. It's like 60 points for an anti-helicopter killer that dies very easily to just 2 MTVs rushing it because it doesn't have the DPS due to the low accuracy. It's just not great. All right, next unit. We went over this 60-point I-Hawk. Next one is the I-Hawk PIP II. For 10 points, you get 5% more accuracy and more range against helicopters. Mainly the 5% more accuracy is what actually makes this worth it. Just like the PIP III, in a pinch, you know, it can be a helicopter unit. It's honestly still B tier. It honestly makes it B tier. Maybe I'm a tad overrating it, but you shouldn't offensively use it versus helicopters, but it can actually be nice in a pinch. And 5% more accuracy is big, because you really often bank on it hitting the first shot. Yeah, we already went over this. It's literally called the same thing, I believe. And HEOS is just like the EOTS Hawk, so yeah. Well, and even more and more. This is again the 60.1, and I keep on, you know, writing down the same unit with the exact same name. PIP III compared to the PIP II, for more 10 points you get another 5% extra accuracy, and more range versus planes, and more range versus helicopters. I think this is a bit of an underrated unit. I myself underrated it for quite a while. Whoopsie. But I think sometimes, and I was part of the two, people underestimate the helicopter range, you know, because it means you can actually park it pretty close to the front line and shut down helicopters as well. You just have to keep in mind that it has only 3 missiles, meaning that if you don't have supply nearby or another cheap AAPs like a PIVADS or something, if your opponent pays attention and saw that it shot 3 missiles, it will just rush it with yet another helicopter, or just rush with 3 helicopters or 4 helicopters until the Hawk is empty, and then the 4th one will kill it, you know. So that is something you have to be very mindful. I mean, it's an RBS carrier like the one earlier, but at least it has decent speed. It has fewer missiles, if I'm not wrong, and no MG, but at least it has speed. It is 25 points, which is dirt cheap, and honestly, like the Wolverine, it can sometimes be a nice plane support unit. For 25 points, mobile it's essentially a mobile manpad. Of course, it doesn't have stealth, it can't go into towns. I wouldn't generally use it, but there's worse units in the game. M45. Let me look up the stats. It is of course wheeled. It has actually pretty good range for 15 points. It fires once a second. It has a shot reload of exactly 1 second. Fires 10 shots, and then has a reload for 6 seconds. It has actually pretty good ground range, given that it's a spec. Most specs have 1000 meter range, 1050 to be precise. It even has a stabilizer. It is fast. I mean, I generally wouldn't recommend using it, but like, it's dirt cheap, not radar, acceptable range. Usable for the price, you know, given that it's wheeled, fast, and has good autonomy for 15 points, I'm willing to give it a pass. I think some people really like it. It's not an amazing base defense, but no. Given all the characteristics outside of the gun, I'm willing to give this the C tier. NOAA is actually my favorite Hawk. It has the accuracy and anti-plane range of the Hawk PIP III, but for 10 points less, loses the anti-helicopter range, which most of the time, while I'm underestimating it, is something that you don't very often use. And maybe it's the second best Hawk, but it certainly is one of the better Hawks, and I vastly prefer it over the non-radar Hawks, which, you know, if you compare to the EOTS Hawk, for 5 points more, you lose 10% more accuracy and 350 meter range versus planes, and it's massive. NASAMS. Some people love it, some people hate it. There's still this I don't know why this still persists. There is this myth that for some reason these missiles have some problem with angles or some shit, you know, that they can't turn fast enough. That's complete bullshit. Why do people believe this? Because due to the thing being fire and forget, if a plane flies over it, it will not, you know, let me put it this way. You see my mouse pointer, yes? Let me open this and just do this really quick. So you see my mouse pointer. Imagine this being the AA piece and the plane flying on the top here. Let the mouse pointer be my plane. And this, where this stands, is the NASAMS. And let's assume the edge of, you know, the window, the video, is the range where it can shoot at. Normal AA pieces like a Hawk see the plane here, start shooting, and the plane flies and flies and maybe gets hit like here, or depending on, you know, how far it is away laterally as well, and maybe gets hit here, but it gets, let's say it gets hit here, or not hit, whatever, and then the Hawk starts firing again and again, and the plane flies, and maybe it gets hit here, right? Fairly normal. The NASAMS, it fires here and here and here and here and here and here and here. Now the thing is, if it fires here, and let's say the plane is essentially just behind it or just past it, and the thing it looks this way, you know, this upwards, and the plane is here, then the missile will obviously have to fly this way, and of course it can't. A Hawk would also not be able to do that. But the thing is, generally speaking, a Hawk will not fire at this point because it fired much earlier, and when a plane is at that point, the missile already hit or missed, or is still in the process of being guided. And since it doesn't have to, like, you know, fly the same angle in like a much shorter time, but actually started being fired much earlier, and when a plane is here, the missile is already in this position, that problem of the angle very, very rarely occurs with guided missiles due to the time they fire it. But the NASAMS just fires like a fucking Gatling gun, all 6 missiles at one plane, and of course there's 2 or 3 missiles that get fired at an angle due to that rate of fire that just are unable to be, you know, to properly aim in. What I said probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. I'm horrible at explaining these things, but it's just complete bullshit. The problem is just that it's fire and forget, meaning that it wastes like half of the missiles it fires most of the time. It does have 7 HE, it does one-shot planes if it gets a crit, it does have acceptable, it has the same range as the Ronin, but it costs 20 points more, 5% less accuracy, 1 more HE, only 5 HP, no armor, only 6 missiles. It dies fast, it eats ammo fast, it uses its ammo fast, I should say, it eats supply like nothing else. Yes, it's like amazing against stuff like 25Ts, of course, with good HE and high rate of fire, and of course high ECM planes in general, in a sense. But against 25Ts and A10s in general, because usually they don't fly over it, but like circle in front of it. But it also just dies so quickly, and it has like massive supply issues. You know, it's 85 points for a unit that doesn't cover a lot of range as well. It's something you have to keep in mind. And NOAA, for 15 points less, covers a much wider, you know, part of the map against planes. In 1v1s on maps like Patriot, not as big of an issue, but let's say you're playing in a team game, or you're playing on Punch Bowl, or you're playing on Plunging or Highway, that isn't a big issue. Yeah. I think it can be like a niche unit that you might want to use if, you know, beforehand, like you're playing against, or the map, and you definitely need that DPS, kind of, if you want to call it that. But I think it's a pretty overrated unit, and at the same time underrated unit. Some people think it's godly, others think it's garbage because of that supposed angle issue, which is just bullshit. But yeah. Okay, anyway, OSA AK, we went over this. PCA. First of all, that's a comma. Second of all, it's an O. Also, AKM, I believe, was in B tier. Yes, it was. Someone was saying that the Roland 3 is inconsistent. I completely disagree, because against planes, you very often only get 2 missiles off. So the 10% extra accuracy is a lot more valuable than the rate of fire. Automatic, I mean, given how strong it is, I think this is I don't think I need to say it, right? It kills everything. It kills planes, it kills helicopters, it kills ground units. If you need me to talk about why this unit is S tier, let me know, but I think we can just skip this. Patriot as well. It is just an amazing A piece. You should always use it in your ES deck, even in 1v1. Although I can accept if you don't use it, you know, I can certainly see why. It's a very expensive unit, and if you're garbage at radar micro, like really bad, then I can see why. But the thing is, even if you're bad, this is a fairly forgiving unit, because for one, if the enemy seed has low range and maybe even no stealth, then you will probably shoot and most likely even hit it before it can even fire its seed missile. Secondly, you can also always just turn it off, and even only turn it on once the enemy plane is turned around or is evacuating, because it has such a fast missile speed that you will still get a chance to hit the enemy plane. Just of course, be mindful that it is also a magnet for a counter battery. PGZ-80, you know, just like the Finnish thing that we went over. Of course, it has one more front armor. I believe their speed is also slightly different, but for all intents and purposes, basically the same unit. PGZ-88 is very interesting. It's a 35 point radar unit, like the Earl Noir, but has 2800 meter range, 7 front armor, has a pretty bad rate of fire of only one shot per second. But just, you know, just like the Finnish Marksman, it will survive at 20 AP seed missile. So it can be like your seed meat shield if you want it to be. Of course, it has a little range, but like that horrible DPS means it is not going to be very consistent against helicopters. And essentially, and the thing with the seed meat shields is that these days they're not very important. They used to be in the past that people used to like just spam pivots in front of the Patriot, but that's just not very usable these days, because very often people will just hear again the enemy AA or something before using planes anyway, stuff like that. Or seed these days is not as much about killing. I mean, outside of 1v1 maybe, but more about suppressing, as it is meant to be. So yeah, the impact of seed meat shield is not really that great these days. And certainly not horrible, but I think it's just also very inconsistent with its low rate of fire. PGZ-95, I wish this had 2 front and 2 side armor, or at least 2 front. The gun is amazing. You have essentially Mistrals as secondary missiles, which are of course much better than Stingers. C's like the Gepard A2 I should say. More range, of course, much more range. You have 0.3 seconds shot reload, so the gun is amazing too. You have, of course, only 50% accuracy, but you have, compared to the Gepard, again, but like the Gepard is just a very good spec to compare things to. Compared to Gepard, 25% lower shot reload is essentially a much higher rate of fire. It's just if the chassis wasn't so bad, it would be pretty good. It's still 70 points for a unit that doesn't, you know, outrange many helicopters, you know, meaning it has only 2,800 meter range. But being a spec for 70 points and having only 1 front armor, meaning you will just get one shot by AMX 10s and the like, it's just really bad. And of course, artillery will deal full damage to all parts of your chassis. And when you have to be at the front line, which spec has to be, that is just so tough, and that is what really holds it down. And as well as, you know, and of course, ideally you would, you know, I think if this was only the spec, only the gun, this would probably be a better unit, because then it's more affordable, and then having only 1 front armor is not as big of a deal. But yeah, it's just, it could be so cool, but it isn't. We went over this, the BRDM Strelas, right? Yeah, in C tier. So many stat copies, and also a lot more C tier in this compared to the infantry, right? Still a lot of B, but very many C tier. We already had this as well. I know maybe you're thinking you shouldn't put all these stat copies in, but I think sometimes people who are not very who haven't played as long might not be aware that, you know, a PLRK S10M is the exact same thing as a Strel 10M if they're not very familiar with military stuff like I was, or only play like one exact deck. So I think that's why it certainly makes sense to still keep it that way. The Pongay 2, I think we had the ITO79, yeah. The Finnish have the exact same thing with the ITO79 here. And once again, it used to be 10 HE in the beta. Of course, in the beta, the Finnish one didn't exist yet. But yeah, this Hawk once again also went over with the Danish Praga. Praga is an interesting thing. It's essentially a Crotal, but for 20 points less, you lose 2 missiles. Generally not worth it. Crotal is definitely a better AA piece. Because the other thing is, of course, even if you have a supply drug nearby, like let's say you buy this and a 15-point supply drug, so for 55 points you get a Crotal in a way, but you get even more missiles because a 15-point supply drug will probably give you more than 2 missiles. Let me actually see what's the 102 per shot, so you get 7 extra missiles. As 15-point supply drug has 800 supply. So you get essentially 9 missiles for 55 points if you were to use that. And if you, of course, but then of course that would mean you have to use 15-point supply drugs, which may not be ideal, but that aside. But I think having a reload time of 10 seconds in between makes this not as great, that combination. It's still a fine unit, but just having 4 missiles is so much better, especially like if your a unit is spotted and the Crotal, you know, has 4 missiles, then it has a much higher chance of killing. But if the Patriot is spotted, missed one of its missiles, then you have to reload for 10 seconds, assuming you even have a supply drug nearby, and then a helicopter or something will just rush you down. So yeah, it's still a fine unit. And it's the only unit in the Yugoslav or Entente even that actually has more than 2,800 meter range. I like it. I like the gameplay wise. I think it's a nice unit. You know, design wise, if you will, gameplay design wise, not the model. I don't care about the model. Yeah, RBS-70. These RBS trucks used to be, I believe, 10 points more and had perfect stabilizers. Those were the times. RBS-70. So I'm gonna do this in one. You have to keep in mind that for 5 points more, you also get the ability to use 2 missiles in a row before having to reload, and that's incredibly important. Because that means that even if it's a bit unlikely, you can at least in one salvo kill an MTV or something like that. The RBS-70 can't. It has to reload for 5 seconds after each missile, and that's just pretty bad. It's still just 70 points, and for 5 points more compared to the tracked thingy used by Norway, you get it on wheels. But the RBS-70 is actually, RBS-90 is actually really nice. It is really more of a supporting unit, a bit more offensively supporting unit, but the problem is that it's the only wheeled and affordable RBS Rover RBS, and a helicopter unit that you get in Scandi, so you have to use it offensively when it is more of a support unit. That can be really frustrating. Similar like a Commonwealth, who kind of has to use the Wolverine offensively if they want any kind of wheeled AA. Kub-M, once again, we went over this. RSPVO Neva M1. It's a wheeled book M1, but you pay 5 points more. And you have no armor, but like in these price points for a unit that you generally don't really spam or something, not that big of a deal. M1T. Now this unit got buffed massively. It used to be 120 points with the same range here, and in 1 vs 1 that was much worse. And then people quote unquote nerfed it to this state, which was actually a buff in my eyes. It's a lot more affordable. The range, while and the accuracy that you lose, yeah, whatever. But like being so much more affordable, especially for 1 vs 1s, was a big deal. I think in team games, certainly S tier. 1 vs 1s, I would not necessarily say it's S tier, so this is kind of rough. Where to put it? I think even though I don't even know. Do most of you guys play team games or 1v1s? You know, I'm gonna put it in S tier, though I personally don't even use it in 1v1s all the time. These days, I think not so much. I just sometimes switch around. Strela 1 once again. I think this is the. This is a 25.1 used by, I think, North Korea as well. Strela 10 also over this, or Strela 10M technically. Now we have the Sava. I think this is without a S tier. It has 2,800 meter range with a 4-shot stabilized non-radar unit. It is relatively fast. It has 6 HE. It will one-shot linkers and such. It has 60% base accuracy and 50% stabilizer. It carries 12 missiles, salvo of 4. It's just incredibly self-sufficient, consistent, strong, even against planes. It is one monster of a unit. Now this, guess what? We went over already. So many copies. Neva, these two Nevas, once again, they're essentially just Book M1 clones on different chassis. Sometimes you have 4 missiles, sometimes you have 3, sometimes you have 4 armor, sometimes you have 1, sometimes you have 0. It is just, you know, and these 5 to 10 points aren't really that big of a deal, once again, for a unit that you generally buy one of and then eventually maybe a second one. But, you know, and with that availability, not really a big deal. This is virtually the same, for example, but you know, here you get like 4 front armor, but you're really slow. Yeah. Sergei, I think this is. Do we already have this? Oh no, the Ural. We did not go over the Ural already. Oh, we had the Polish one, right? The Hypnorid. Let's quickly check. Yeah, the Hypnorid. Probably C tier. Where did they put it? Oh god, yeah, it's in C tier. So yeah, that's where it also belongs. Next we have the Sergei Mod, which was 15 points more, has increased range and accuracy. But the thing is, it's still only C tier, honestly. Why? Because it has such a long reload time between bursts that you're probably better off getting 2 normal Sergeis. I mean, sure you have the range, but offensively you still wouldn't want to use it because it's not very consistent. And with the low armor, and like low HP and no armor, yeah. Shinaf is once again a I-Hawk. Shinaf 2 is the PIP II. So many copies, dude. Vov 3. It's a good unit. It's a very good unit. I much prefer it over the Bov 30. It has a higher rate of fire than Bov 30. Let me tell you the exact numbers. So the Bov 3 fires 30 shots with 0.3 seconds in between, which is pretty high, higher than Gepard, but of course you have low range and accuracy compared to the Gepard. Bov 30 fires with 0.4 shots. Although the Bov 30 fires its complete ammo, 95 shots, the Bov 3 has essentially a magazine of 30 shots, but then again, it's a lot of shots, so essentially you're never gonna notice it actually that it has a magazine, and 210 shots in total. So you know it's not gonna run out anytime soon. But I mean it's cheap. It has good accuracy. 35% is great. Compared to, you know, if you compare this to the VDAA or the TCM, the TCM fires with a 0.4 shots in between and has only 25% accuracy with the same range. So I think this is easy A tier. It is decent base defense. It's not great because ideally you want your base defense also be acceptable versus ground units, but it's also good at flanks in openers, even offensively sometimes, and can even, if planes fly over it, can deal a good amount of damage with that rate of fire. Both 30, I mean, both 30 is still fine. It has an increased range, but at 40 points, you already start to be, you know, at the point where your unit will probably be used at the front line, has to be somewhat consistent, strong, and above 30 with decent range against helicopters, but poor range against planes. It's gonna be fine versus helos, but then you, again, at that price, it's fine, but also low rate of fire, etc. So it's, yeah. The Spat Foka is an interesting one. It has the same rate of fire as the Gepard once again. For the same price, 5%, 10% less accuracy actually, and I already forgot how much stabilizer does the Gepard have? 30%, 60-30, I guess. It should be easy to remember. It's fine. It's honestly only B tier because it only has one side armor, meaning that it does get one shot by a lot of stuff to the side, which happens more often than not. By the way, it makes sense in such sneaking around, autocannon sneaking around, dealing full damage to the side. Yeah, it's fine, but like nothing groundbreaking. Stormer is great. This is rough. I much prefer this over the ADATS because it has a lot more missiles. It's a lot more affordable. So it's a lot more self-sufficient. And its ground capabilities means you're not gonna be like, for 75 points, even if you might even prefer, or the unit might even be better if you just took away its ground capabilities, because sometimes you don't want it to shoot at ground units because you don't want to get detected, and you don't want to like suddenly have to engage a plane unit or a helicopter unit while you're currently guiding against ground unit. So you're probably better. Ideally, you'd be better off if it had no AP at all. But unfortunately, you cannot turn it off unless you mod the unit in such a way. But it is great. It's self-sufficient. Has a lot of range, not as much as a Cortal, but 65% accuracy. 6 HE is still good. Good range. 8 shots before it has to reload. What's not to like? Of course, it's not real like an EOTS and such, but I don't know if it's like, it's probably honestly still S tier though. I really like this. Maybe it's only A tier. It's one of those units that's a bit hard to judge because it's stuck in Commonwealth. So you only see it in Commonwealth and nobody wants to play Commonwealth. But it's honestly a great unit. Short arrow, it used to be even worse, but it's just so inconsistent with 50% accuracy. What's actually the real time on that? It's also 3 seconds, like the Chaparral. So it's basically a Chaparral with one less HE. But of course it's wheeled and fires 4 shots before it has to reload. It used to have only 4 shots and that was horrible, I believe. But then they buffed it a bit. Also only 45% accuracy. But it's just very inconsistent with its fairly low rate of fire. And it's a good unit, but like nothing groundbreaking. We're just gonna finish this off. Drake Drapier. It's not so great. It's usable, but like no armor, slow, and couple that with a helicopter focus unit. It does have 8 missiles at the ready immediately, only 40 points, good range and 50% accuracy are kind of nice, but yeah. FSA is a good unit. It's not amazing. Once again, it's very slow, virtually defenseless against helicopters. And not really, but like 2,100 meter range is really low for a missile system. Fires 8 missiles before it has to reload again, or until it's empty. 60% accuracy, it's great. It's amphibious, which can be nice. But once again, very slow, and 55 points. Yeah, it's basically like a mini Patriot in that sense, that it basically only kills planes, but virtually never does anything against helicopters. More like a Hawk, I guess you could say. Yeah, it's a good unit, but yeah. Then we have twice the same unit, or the same unit once more, with the British. Type 80 spec. We also went over with. It's the copy of the PGC-80. Then you have the Shilka, which is interesting. It used to be like the prime example of base defense. It has good, like amazing rate of fire, 0.2 seconds between shots, 15 shots, so and then 5-second reload. So it will very often just empty its magazine and then reload for 5 seconds. But like more than average range compared to autocannons, versus helicopters. That's a big thing, of course. Not so great range against ground. No additional compared to normal specs. but it's not radar, it's cheap. It's somewhat mobile at least. It's fine for base defense, but once again, that you know, magazine is kind of what holds it back. But that huge burst damage means that even if planes fly over it with its fairly low range but existent range, they actually will not be, you know, they won't be fine. Let me put it that way. M1992 spec is very interesting because it is the only. I mean, it's not really a shield car, right? It's actually not. Well, first time I noticed this is not like a BRU's or shield car turret. I always thought it's like a shield car kind of turret, which it isn't. Also, I don't think that's how the gun is supposed to work. Anyway, it's actually not that horrible because it has a very, very high, pretty high rate of fire, like same rate of fire as Strop, so 0.3 seconds. Gepard has 0.4 between shots. Has 100 shots, fires it until it's empty, so no magazine or something like that. So pretty good rate of fire, but of course only 45% accuracy and 15% stabilizer. So it is a pretty good spank, but also not particularly fast, not amazing autonomy. And these are things that are kind of important for spanks. And this is quite literally one. Again, the accuracy and rate of fire are fine, or like the rate of fire makes up for the not so great accuracy given the price point, but it's usable. Ural, we just had one with the Sergei, and we also talked a bit about that in the Soviet coalition review, Putin and I. VDAA, it's basically a TCM for 5 points more, right? The BTR 152 TCM. It's fine. But 25 versus 30 points is not to be ignored. But I'm just thinking that is 25 versus 30 points for essentially the same unit. Let's see, what's the TCM stats? It's also much slower. Like, not much slower, but it is slower. 65. Same ammo though, it loses 1 top armor. Honestly, yeah, I think it's like 1/6 less that the BTR costs compared to VDA. Oh, and we got a. There we go. So I think it is actually a tad worse, believe it or not, even though it's only 5 points. But like at that price range, it's a much bigger deal. And a unit that you buy a lot more often, of course. Wheel Array Mystery is a bit underrated. It's not amazing, but like a 35-point mobile Mistral is kind of nice. But of course, you have to fire a reload for 6 seconds after each shot, and it's not stabilized. No armor, 5 HP, and you have to use it, but it's only 35 points as well. And once again, one of those supporting type units that you just can't fit in Eurocore. Or like, you know, some people use it, but I think it's very, very hard to fit in. But there are times where I wish, like, oh, I wish I could fit this in, but it's just so hard with mortars, Crotal, Roland, LRM, you know. Shilka, did we go over all of these with the... Yeah, the German had... East Germany has all of them as well. So, yeah, where did we put the Shilka? Did we put them all in C tier? Like, the Shilkas, they're all, you know... just this type of supporting units, right? But if you want me to talk about them, listen to the previous episode. I know you can't see the thing on the left, but I can't scroll down further. These names, dude, these names. Tunguska, we went over with as well. I think I only gave it B tier, right? Now the Tunguska M though. This is a different thing. Definitely A tier. Why? You don't have to be nearly as close to the front line due to that incredibly good 9M311. So meaning that you leave it a bit further back and it will just snipe helicopters, and if planes fly over it, then the gun will just destroy them. And then of course, if the opportunity arises, you can be much closer to the front line, but you just don't have to stay there. That's just such a huge plus and actually makes it a lot more survivable. It's definitely an upgrade that is worth 15 points. Now this, of course, once again, a Shilka. And last, and possibly least, the Sopel. The Sopel. I do not like the Sopel. Why do I not like the Sopel? Well, the gun is basically the same thing you get on those Crash-Head or on those Urals, right? Like this one, same gun. You get more accuracy, of course. You gain a bit more range, and you gain a stabilizer, but it's essentially the same gun. I believe. Let me actually check. Yes, it's the same gun. And you got 2 4G Mistrals with the Groms, or 8 I should say, but you have to reload after 2. But the problem is just that it will shoot its gun, barely deal damage, have to reload for 10 seconds, shoot its Groms, miss with 1, helicopter still alive. By the time you reload it, the helicopter is not stunned anymore and will just kill you. I do not like this unit. It's not particularly good against planes as well, right? Other specs for the same price, radar or not, will probably deal not insignificant damage to a plane flying over them. The Sopel not so much. There isn't as much of a cult around it like there's about the Strop 2, but I think it is. Some people still kind of overrated. Also, only 1 front armor, it dies very quickly. There's good availability, but just the gun. This gun can be nice, but when you pay 45 points for this, the gun is not very nice. If the Groms had like a salvo of 4 missiles, like you fire 4 before having to reload, honestly it would be such a different thing. But the fact that you have to only 2 at the ready means that you're very often, even 8 HP helicopters, you will just very often keep alive, and it's just so bad for a 45-point unit, even if it's not radar. Yeah, and that's entire units done in 2 videos. If you have questions, leave them down below, I should say. Only 1 E tier unit, a lot of C, and yeah. Once again, like all the other tabs, etc., I will eventually, after I'm done with all of them, probably give them another pass very quickly or something, maybe to adjust some stuff. But yeah. Next up, we're probably just gonna do it in chronological order. So we're gonna do artillery, but maybe I'll do something else. Who knows? In any case, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something maybe as well. You found it interesting, and hopefully see you next time. See ya!